Hi there, Man Alive listener. This is your host, Shayna James. You may or may not know that I started a new podcast. It's called Practicing Love, Have the Best Love and Sex of Your Life After 40. I wanted to post a few episodes over here so you can get a feel for the new podcast and hopefully subscribe to it so you don't miss any of the new episodes. I'm excited to build on Man Alive and support people, all people, with love and relationships, dating and sex, and what it takes to not only keep love and sex alive, but to actually have the best love and sex of your life, especially in midlife and beyond. Though to be honest, whatever age you are, there will be powerful information for you there. So I hope you enjoy this episode of Practicing Love, and feel free to reach out with questions and ahas and also topics you'd like to see covered there. Welcome to this episode of Practicing Love. I am your host, Shayna James, and I'm excited to be here today to talk about the practice of love and how it is a challenge for anyone and everyone I've met. You know, it really isn't easy. And you're going to get to hear from an amazing man today, Christopher Veal. Thank you, Christopher, for joining us.
Oh, happy to be here with you.
And we don't actually know where this is going to go. You know, my vision is to ask questions around particular struggles in people's love lives and see, all right, you know, what were some of those hard times? What happened? And then how did you learn and grow? And what have you changed in your life so that you can have more satisfying, fulfilling, exciting love?
Mm-hmm.
And you're a particularly amazing man in that you have a podcast called the Vulnerable Man Podcast, and you really support men to open up and be vulnerable. And you came from it was at Navy, Army,
Marine Corps.
Marine Corps background. You were a combat veteran. So to have a combat veteran who also is open to vulnerability and to be a man who expresses yourself in that way in the world and brings yourself to relationships in the world is very special.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And it's definitely been a journey, is what I'll say. And I'm a work in progress. I don't have it all figured out, and I'm continuing on the path. So I'm excited for where this conversation is going to go. And
good. And boom, mic drop, right? You don't have it figured out. I think that's a huge part of being in a successful love relationship, or any relationship, is realizing we don't know everything, and we get to explore. And I also just want to say that you're the author of The Whole Man, Evolving Masculinity, and your TEDx talk is about deeper connection, better world. So
you've done your homework.
You are the perfect person to be here.
Well, and I will also say you've been on my podcast not once, but twice. Yeah. So if folks haven't heard that, go check it out, because Shayna dropped some wisdom on you there too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about love and practicing.
All right. It's getting real now. It's like, okay, strap yourselves in.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I know this is a particularly raw time for you, being in a relationship transition. Mm-hmm. Anything you want to say about that? Because you did tell me that this is one of the healthiest breakups you've had, even though it's hard.
What do I want to say? It's been the best relationship I ever had. And like, I learned a lot about myself in the process of it too. So yeah, I don't know where we're going to go in this, and we'll just be real.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Yeah. So what would you say, right? What is one of the biggest struggles that you've had in your relationships or in your love life that's caused friction or conflict or pain and suffering in your relationships?
Nothing. I've been perfect. Not. She's like, that's not what he's supposed to say. No.
We're going to cut that part out. No,
right. We're going to edit that out. In all seriousness, though, for me, one of the patterns that I knew I went to for years was always putting myself at the very bottom of the list of priorities. It wasn't so much that I was a people pleaser.
Yeah.
But I would make sure other people were taken care of, and to the point where there wasn't anything left in the tank for me. Yeah. And for a long time, I just thought that was how I had to be. You know, it was kind of, I don't want to say it was the way I was brought up, but that's part of how my family was. And so I thought that's just the way you were. And one of the ways that it really got in the way in my marriage before is it would cause me to build resentment, because my needs weren't being met. And what I also didn't realize, I wasn't asking for what I needed either, because
Yeah.
I was so stuck in the, I need to make sure everyone else is taken care of.
Yeah.
So we had a young daughter at the time. I was trying to take care of my wife who was dealing with health issues, trying to be the breadwinner. And so I was constantly thinking of others,
Yep.
but getting frustrated when I wasn't getting what I wanted, and ignoring the fact that I wasn't asking for it either. So
Yeah.
that was one of the ones for me. Is I'd say it's twofold. One, not asking for what I wanted and needed, and
Yeah.
two, not making myself a priority, which led to resentment. And so those are two big ones that I've done a
Those are
lot of work
huge.
on. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I still continue to work on too. So we can
Right.
pull apart one or both. Like, yeah, there's lots of learning in either one.
Yes. And thank you for admitting and being vulnerable and that you're still working on it. Because all the
Yeah.
things that I learned in my relationships and my divorce, right? I'm still practicing. It doesn't just go away.
Right.
And oftentimes the only way we get to practice is in relationship, right? We can't, some of these things we can't heal just on our own. And I think that's what makes relationships so beautiful and also so challenging.
Yeah. I used to say jokingly, relationships are easy until you involve a second person. That's when things get complicated, right?
Yeah.
But it's true. I mean, any human interaction we have, whether it's a romantic relationship or a familial one, there's always going to be challenges because you're dealing with a different person who has different needs.
Yes.
And we don't always teach our kids and the people in our lives how to be in relationship with us. We
No.
just like, I'll just say, I've been in relationships in the past where it feels like my partner expects me to be a mind reader. And I don't know about
Yes.
you, but that's not a skill set that I was born with or developed. And so sometimes it would cause frustration because their needs weren't being met, but I didn't know what they needed. And then by the same token, I would just feed into it
Right.
because I was doing the same
Because
thing.
you were doing
So
the same thing.
exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about that one, right? I mean, they definitely go together, that idea of putting yourself last
Mm-hmm.
and then also not whether, I don't know, was it that you didn't feel like you deserved to have your needs met or wants met or you were ashamed
Let
of
me lay down
them
on the
or
couch there, Freud. Like there's
yeah.
probably a lot of reasons behind it, but here's what I'd say with it.
Okay.
I think the biggest thing was initially I didn't quite have the language
Uh-huh.
to ask for it,
Yep.
or it might have been that I didn't feel safe.
Yep.
And also with it, that it took me time to really unpack and understand is just because I ask for it doesn't mean that I'm going to get a yes. And if I
Right.
was attached to someone saying yes to it, then
Yep.
that actually wasn't a request, it was a demand.
Right.
Right. Actually, you talk about something like that in your
Yep.
book, I think.
Yep.
Right.
For
Yeah.
sure.
And that, I remember that because I'm seeing it in the background. I know it's sitting right there on my bookshelf.
Yep.
Um, and that for me was a big thing to really overcome, because when I started to get the point where I could say, here's what I'm asking for, and not be attached to whether they say yes or no, that was really empowering for me. It was hard at first
Yeah.
because asking for it, and part of the reason that I didn't is because I felt like I don't want to be a burden on other people.
Right.
That was probably that underlying story I was telling myself, is like, don't be a burden to other people.
Yeah.
I grew up fiercely independent, and so I was like, I'm always the one to say to other people, hey, how can I help you? How can I be of service? Right. Always willing to ask that. And then when people would ask me, I'm like, oh no, I'm good. Like I wouldn't think to say, please let me
Please,
accept help
here's
from
what I
you.
need, right?
And so I
And
think
it's
those
such
are
a
some of the elements. Yeah.
beautiful inclination, right? There's like, this is where often when I'm working with people, we don't want to say, oh, just, shut that down. Because there is, I think about it as there's an essence and there's an imposter, right? So the essence of
Mhm.
you being an open-hearted man of service and loyalty and all of that is incredible, right? And out of balance when you start forgetting about yourself.
Right. Right. Well, I think there's also an element too of, I had to learn how to, I'll say, be a little bit selfish,
Uh-huh.
and pull apart that my asking for what I wanted and needed didn't mean that it discounted anybody else either.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something that I took some time working on, because I thought, well, if I ask for what I want, I'm imposing on the other person. And I had a
Yes.
good friend say to me once, hey, Christopher, you know how you like to ask people like how you can be of service? And I'm like, yeah. And they said, what do you get from it? And I said, well, if they say yes, like I get to help them out and, give them some value.
Right. It's like,
It's
can
like a
you
gift.
turn that
And
back
then,
and
and then,
please?
and then they said to me, so why do you think other people wouldn't want to give that same thing to you? And I'm like, oh, how dare you use my words against me? But it was an eye-opening moment, because I realized,
Very.
oh yeah. And I really had to really remind myself that my accepting people's offer of help wasn't
Yeah.
an imposition. Like if they
Yeah.
didn't want to offer, they wouldn't have offered.
Right. Well, and that one of the tricky things about that is that like you, sometimes people do offer
Mm-hmm.
or over offer when they don't necessarily want to offer.
Right. Yeah.
But how do we kind of grow each other up, right? And relate to people as though they're adults who have a
Mhm.
choice and they can say no when they want to say no, and then check in to see, do I really believe that they want to give right now?
Right.
Does it feel like there's a genuine desire here, or they're getting something out of this, or are they rolling their eyes and sighing and
Yeah.
making a big stink out of this,
Yeah.
or even just sort of underlying, do you have some kind of intuition that there's something going on there? Because it sounds like someone with you felt, I don't imagine you were the eye roller or the sire, you were more the underground giver, right? Like
Oh,
all of
absolutely.
your needs were
I would
invisible.
I would go way out of my way
Hmm.
to help take care of others,
Yeah.
often at my own expense.
Yeah.
Right. And I told myself the story of like, well, but I'm helping to take care of people.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing that's also interesting with it is I had to learn that sometimes when people asked things of me,
Huh.
I needed to say no.
Right.
I needed to resist that urge to want to say yes
Yeah.
because I needed to learn how did I have to set healthy boundaries for myself?
Yeah.
Because if I'm constantly saying yes, then I have nothing in the tank for me. And
Yes.
so that was also a growth
That's the
edge,
prioritization, right?
right?
Learning to
Yeah.
prioritize yourself.
Yeah. And also not tell myself, oh, I say no to that person. It's not that I'm saying no to them. I'm saying in this moment, I can't do that thing.
Right.
And I had to remind myself of that because I would, my inner critic would go, well, see, you're just shutting them down. And like, no, it's not that at all.
Right. Right. Your inner critic,
I don't know,
inner critic.
Freudian slip. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Inner critic globalizes it. And then
Mhm.
I don't know about you, but for me, I remember when I first started saying no to things and letting myself not just be the nice one all the time, I would have this panic that people were no longer going to trust me or like me or want to be my friend or love me, any of those things.
Yeah. I think I'd probably built some intrinsic value for myself that being of service is one of the things that, people appreciated. And yeah, similar. I don't know if it was so much that I thought they wouldn't like me, but it was probably okay, if I say no, like they're probably, the catastrophizing, like they're never going to ask again,
Yes,
which
exactly,
ultimately
exactly.
probably isn't a bad thing, because part of the other thing I tell people is, if you always say yes to people, they're going to rely on you and
Right,
you're not building self sufficiency. So
right.
it was a reminder again of good friends of mine kind of using my own words against me, not
Yeah.
against me, helping me see some of the
For
wisdom
you,
that I
actually.
sometimes have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's again, it's an ongoing process as we've been talking about.
Yeah. I'm thinking about how it can be so amazing to be someone who enters into a relationship and the person you enter into a relationship with is incredibly supportive. And in my history, I've had people say, get resentful, like you were talking about, like, well, now, I just did that because you wanted it, or I was that way because you wanted me to be. And so now, as I'm in relationship with someone who is most generous person I've probably ever met or been in relationship with, I find myself checking it out and saying, hey, I love you. I care about you. I want to be here for you too. Is this something you really want to do right now?
Mhm.
And building trust in that way where we both have our eye on each other's tendencies to give or overgive.
Yeah.
And I'm curious for you how you've worked with yourself in that, right? Like, how do you currently practice that part?
I think it's finding people to help you be that sanity check
Hmm.
and give you the feedback. I mean, some of it you have to do your own work and build that self-awareness. And sometimes we have these old habits so ingrained we don't notice them.
Hmm.
And having someone external, whether it's that partner in our life in that relationship or someone else who we trust that can say, "Hey, you did that thing again."
Yeah.
From a place of not making us wrong, but
Right.
helping us build awareness. I think that's an important piece. One thing is as we're talking about this too that hit me is in this last relationship I was in, one of the really big ahas I had is there were so many of my old habits and behaviors, like I call it like that programming that was running below the surface,
Yeah.
and those old stories that because of how I'd grown up or past relationships, like they were operating almost as defense mechanisms, but I wasn't aware. And
Mhm.
sometimes there were things that would trigger it that my partner wasn't necessarily trying to do, but it would
Yes.
happen. And vice versa. There were
Yeah.
times like I might use a certain word that to me is an innocuous word, but to that person open up this thing.
Yes.
And so there were a number of times where we would have conversations, say, okay, I get that. I'm sorry for that. Because there's a big, like, important piece is to apologize and not say, but here's why I did it.
Yes.
And that's a big lesson I learned too, is if you're going to apologize to me, apologize. Don't explain the why until I ask for it. Because if you explain the why, to me, it just wipes out the apology.
Yes. Right. Oh, I'm sorry. I did it because of this.
Yeah. Right. Like, don't tell me the why. I want to know you own the apology.
Yeah.
And then when I can come to terms with that, now I can hear if I want to.
Yes.
I don't always need to. Right.
Yes.
But anyhow, I'm going off tangent. But where I was going with this.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, because a lot of people have a hard time apologizing and feel like if I say I'm sorry, then I'm saying, I'm saying I'm wrong, or I'm saying that I'm at fault. And I think you and I both know that's not true.
All you are apologizing for is whatever that hurt or that impact that was unintended for the person.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying that I'm wrong, you're right, but even just saying I'm sorry that what I did made you feel that way, right? Or that my actions or my words had that impact. Like, stop, period, no more.
Yep.
Okay. And then it's, what do you need from me right now?
Love that.
To move forward, right? Or like something like that. Like, what do you need from me to repair that? Sometimes it's just, I need you to hear that.
Yep.
Often what we do is we try to go to the justification, and what somebody hears then is, I'm sorry, but.
Yes.
And then it just goes, well, then what's the point of it?
Yeah.
And that was something that I continue to work on. As I said, sometimes it's easier than other times. And particularly if there's something that's really an emotional response that's getting triggered, it can be hard to say, I am sorry.
Yeah.
Because I may feel like I've been wronged in the process too.
Exactly.
And instead of counterattacking, which just doesn't do anything in the long run in a good way, it's, how do I pause? Because if we're both in this emotional whirlwind and spinning, somebody's got to be the one to say, hold on, let me step back for a second.
Yes.
It may not cause the other person to step out of their emotional whirlwind, but if you both keep spinning, like, what's it going to result in?
There's no way, right? It's like it just escalates into warlike situation.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, because you asked before, like, what are some of the ways? Years ago, I did a course called Crucial Conversations. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I used to teach it in the organization I was in.
I know the book. I didn't know that was a course.
Well, I'll tell you, but here's the thing that I love in it. When you're in those emotionally charged situations, it's coming back to the point of, what is it that I really want?
Yes.
And so often when we're in those conflicts or those arguments, what we want is to be right. I want you to be wrong. I want you to be hurt, like whatever it is. And it's I focused.
Yes.
And for me, when I was in those moments and maybe those charged conversations, and if I go, wait a minute, what do I really want? Well, what I want is us to have a healthy, respectful relationship, even if we disagree.
Yeah.
And as soon as I realized that was what I wanted, my intention shifted. And then the way I behaved shifted.
Right. So instead of then fighting for what would make you right.
Right.
I've
like
heard
if
it said,
if
you
what
can
I
be
want
right, or
is,
you can be connected.
Yeah. Like if what I want is for you to be wrong, I'm going to behave in a very certain way. But if what I want is for us to be able to be in a relationship and respect each other, doesn't mean we always got to like each other, because we're going to have moments. That has me show up differently. Right. And that actually takes some of the, I don't want to say the emotion out of it, but it also shifts the stories that I'm telling myself.
It does.
And so that allows me sometimes to take the pause and step back and go, okay. And there's been times where I've said, you know what, right now I'm not my best self.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually going to stop this conversation.
God, I want people to listen to this like 7 times, because you're saying, I mean, there's so much wisdom in what you're saying,
right?
Like, slow it down.
Yeah, I will talk slower. But there's a piece too of, like, I would rather walk away from a conversation in the moment than stay in it and say something that I really don't mean, or I will regret because I'm caught up in those emotions.
Yeah.
And so it also takes saying, I will revisit this conversation.
Yes.
But if I keep going forward right now,
I will
be my best self, and I don't want to do harm to this relationship because that's not what I really want. And they may or may not want that. They may not be willing to disengage.
They may have, they may have feelings about that. But that was when I got divorced and realized what had been causing a lot of friction. My commitment was, I will basically shut the fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
When I start feeling triggered and I start feeling like I'm going to say something that sends us down a rabbit hole, that is disrespectful, that is not seeing the best in the person across from me. Yeah. It's time for a pause. It's time for get the lizard brain back into balance.
Yeah. Well, and for me, one of my triggers is when people interpret my meaning of something or my intent. Like
Ah,
they're like, you
okay.
did this because,
Uh-huh.
and I'm like, don't tell
Whoa,
me
whoa,
what I
whoa,
meant
whoa,
by it,
whoa,
right?
whoa.
Like that one woo, spins me up. And I've really had to be conscious of when that happens, like take a breath,
Mm-hmm.
literally.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, not go on the attack. Like that's not what I meant, because
Right.
that was the old habit. And saying, hold on, I hear you saying that. And I'd like to just make sure you're clear. Please don't interpret my intent.
Uh-huh.
What I can hear is how my actions impacted you, but please don't tell me why I did it,
Beautiful.
because you don't know it. So that was part of me asking for it, and sometimes having to do it more than once, because again, they're in their old stories,
Right.
right? And so it really became a way of, how do we each collectively find a way to pause if we need to.
Yes.
And sometimes it was, all right, we're just not going to talk about this right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll come back tomorrow, tonight, whatever it is. But let's both come from a place where we can say what we want to
Yeah.
without going to the, I'm hurt and I'm scared and I want to lash out.
Right. And therefore I'm going to blame, shame, and attack,
Yes.
right? I mean, if you
Yes.
take out blaming, shaming, and attacking and shift internally to looking at, all right, what's happening for me here,
Mm-hmm.
self-responsibility, it
Yeah.
changes so much.
That's all good stuff. I wish somebody had written a book about
Oh
that.
my God.
That would be amazing. I wonder what they'd call it. I'd call it honest sex, but that's just me. Anyhow, here's what I want to say in that too, though. There's a piece about, I will say, that helped me to be able to be in those conversations is
Yeah.
using I language more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the old Christopher, or the younger Christopher, I guess, would have said like you. And by shifting, saying, here's how I feel as
Yes.
a result of that, it also took some of it out of it, because it wasn't saying to the person, you did this. It was saying, when you did this action, here's
I
how I felt.
felt, right. This is the impact it had on
Yeah.
me. And not
Not
you
that you
made me
meant to make me
feel.
feel. Yeah. Yeah. You
Exactly.
made me feel sad. I didn't make you do anything. Hate to
Mm-hmm.
tell you, I don't have those
Mm-hmm.
powers. What you mean is, and I wouldn't say that to someone because that's going to just send somebody up too,
Thank you for clarifying
but
that.
helping them to find the language, right? And saying, so what I'm hearing is, when I did this, it had you feel sad.
Yeah.
Right. Got it. Yes. And sometimes even slowing down to help understand the other person.
Oh, yes,
Because if we feel heard, we're more likely to hear the other person too.
for sure.
But often when we get in arguments, we are so adamant for, I need to advocate for what I'm standing for.
Yes.
And, I love it. It's cheesy, but covey, right? Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Like transform
It's
things.
brilliant.
Yeah. And
I
somebody
had
has
a
to go
teacher years
first.
ago who said, you may feel like you're going to die in hearing everything, right? Because all
Yeah.
your defenses are going to come up, all your
Yep.
protections, all that identity. But
Mm-hmm.
this is who I am.
Yeah.
No way, you can't blame me for that. And yet, oh, so powerful to actually sit there and then not attack back, but to say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, here's what I'm
Here's what I
hearing you
heard.
say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And let's talk about this because, right, if we're on the same team as a partner, then we want to talk about it. We want to work it through. I actually just had I navigated something with a dear friend of mine, my closest girlfriend, where we had different understandings of, um, she realized that there was this assumption that I didn't want to see her. And so everything that we
Oh.
were trying to navigate time together and everything was coming through that, I realized I was trying to make it easy for her
Right.
and saying, you don't have to come, you don't have to do this. And so then she
Yeah.
didn't feel like I wanted to see her. And I was like, no, I'm just trying to make it easy for you. And then we got into this tangle and,
Yep.
it wasn't easy. We sat there and we were like, okay, what is happening for each of
Well,
us?
and in that too, we tell ourselves stories, right? So
Yes.
maybe she told herself the story of Sheena doesn't want to spend time with me.
Mm-hmm.
So now what's going to happen is the things that she has interactions with, she's
You're
going to look for the
hearing
things
through.
that
Right.
confirm
Right.
Sheena doesn't want to spend time with me. Oh, like whatever's easiest for you. Oh, she does. Like I'm not interpreting that's what it was, but we look
Right.
for the things that support our beliefs.
And then I'm doing the same thing on the
And you're
other
doing the same
side.
thing on your end, right? And until somebody says, hold on, like, what is it you really want? Here's what I really want. We can go, oh, actually, we're not at
Oh,
odds,
yes.
right? But we
And
tell
hold
ourselves these
on,
stories
we
and
really
we
care
believe they're the
about each
facts.
other. Yes.
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
said before, like, oh, my intention is
Yeah.
that I want us to be
Yeah.
connected. I want us to respect each other.
And sometimes sharing that can be really powerful because we often maybe in the moment go, actually, what I want right now is for us to be able to have a conversation and hear each other. But if we don't tell the
Mm,
other person, they're going to try and interpret what our intentions are. And as far as I know, nobody I know is good at it. Like people are batting zero.
Yeah.
And so that's why I tell people when you're about to have a difficult conversation, sometimes starting with it, like, I know we've had some frustration with each other in the last day. I want us to be able to have a conversation and hear what's important. And I want you to know that before we start this conversation. That can have that other person kind of go, oh, I don't have to come ready to fight.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Now,
I
they
want to
may
hear you.
still,
I
they
want us
may
to hear each
still,
other. Mm-hmm.
but then you communicate, here's my intention, and you
Yeah.
may need to reinforce it.
Yes.
You need to make sure your actions support what you tell them. Because if you say, I want us to be able to have a conversation, and then you go on the attack, what they're going to go is, I got you. You were trying to bait and switch me. Let me see that that never happens again.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm hearing and what I'm getting from all the things you said, and I need to make a list.
I ramble a lot. Sorry.
No, it's amazing. What I'm hearing is that, that you are a masterful communicator.
I will say I'm good and I'm working to get better.
Okay. So what I hear
Okay.
is you have incredible capacity to witness yourself, to understand human dynamics, to check yourself, right? And then my question is, how does it go down in those moments, right? Because we're not perfect as humans who are aware of all of this. We still have our challenges. And so, yeah, anything you want to share about the moments that are hard?
So the first thing I'll say is thank you, because one of my defense mechanisms is I
You deflect.
Right? I do. And I noticed, and I caught myself. So it was like, all right, Christopher, telling yourself. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And to your question of how do you catch yourself in the moment? I think it's practice.
Yeah.
And
There
I know
we go.
that sounds easy, but it's practice, but it's also a commitment and a desire to improve that behavior. Because if you don't genuinely, if I don't sincerely want to come from a place of deepening connection, no matter what I say, it's going to come across as false.
There you go.
So it starts with, again, I come back to what is it you really want?
Yeah.
And if you're sincere in it, it's about continuing to lean in.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've realized is even if the other person is wanting to push back, coming back to here's what's important. And I get that maybe you're not hearing me right now and believing me, and I'm still going to stand in this because we are worth it.
Yes.
So I don't know if I answered your question or not.
I never remember what my question was after I asked.
That's all right. I don't either.
But what I'm taking from this is, well, first of all, one thing what you just said about, okay, I'm going to stand in this. And in some moments, that sovereignty, that integrity of knowing yourself and being able to trust yourself and say, this is what I'm standing for. This is what I'm standing in.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible, powerful. In other moments, there's also, you know what, I'm going to be curious about this and not think, well, just because I was this way yesterday, I know myself wholly and completely, and you can't question me.
Right.
So there's a humility there. And you just said something really powerful, which is practice plus commitment plus sincere intention.
Yeah.
Those three things, we could create this triangle, right? Of, oh, my sincere intention is that we stay connected. My commitment is to us, maybe simply it's being connected, or my commitment is that in any conversation we have, we respect each other. Yeah. And then we're going to fall off our bike, or we're going to, we're learning to walk, we're falling down. But the practice is, oh yeah, we come back to it again and again.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things that you saying that hit for me too, is one, reminding ourselves that we're human.
Yeah.
We are not going to get it perfect.
Yeah.
Because often we see these, and don't even get me started about social media, but we see stuff where people have these picture perfect lives. Yeah. And all the, like on the TV shows, the resolution happens by the end of the episode and everything's wonderful. And so we tell ourselves, well, if I haven't got it all figured out by the end of that 42-minute episode, I'm doing something wrong. Mm-hmm. So I tell myself constantly, I'm human. Yeah. My last partner, I said, I will make mistakes. I will not intentionally hurt you. Mm-hmm. And I will hurt you because we are in a relationship, just like you will hurt me. Yep. So I think owning that and giving the other person permission to be human too. Yes. Right. Remembering that. But then also when it happens, own it, but be willing to give yourself some grace in it too. Yeah. Because we are often much more forgiving of others, and we will rake ourselves across the coals for the same thing. Yeah. And so it's reminding myself, okay, I didn't get it right the way I wanted to. Lesson learned. And how do I want to show up
Mm-hmm.
from this moment forward. Because another thing that I've learned too is I use this mantra kind of like meet the person that's in front of you right now.
Mm.
And what we often do in relationships is there's that thing they did last week or last month
Totally.
that we
Last
hold on
year,
to,
last 10 years
right?
ago.
Yeah, whatever it was, but we hold on to it. And so when we interact with them now, that's in the back of our mind. Well, they did this thing.
Yeah.
And what I say is interact with the person here because I'm not the same person I was 10 minutes ago when we started. And if you are holding me to that,
Yeah.
you're not really being fair to me. And it doesn't mean you forgive if they've done something that's a transgression, but also show up if they said something that hurt you yesterday, they may not be coming from the same place today. So meet them where they are. And if they're trying to apologize, don't drag them back to where they were. Like, how do you mend things going forward?
Yeah.
So I'll pause for a second there because that was a lot of rambling.
Well, I think you discount yourself when you say rambling because
Okay.
to
See, there you
me,
go. And that's what I do. Humility is an overused fault sometimes. So thank you.
yeah, yeah, because there's so much in there. I mean, like I said, I'm just taking notes and that sense of interacting with the person now. I've worked with a lot of couples where there are hurts that have happened in the past
Mm-hmm.
and they're deep, they cut hard. And so then as people are attempting to apologize or say, this is my commitment now, rather than, okay, how are we going to build trust here?
Yeah.
There's a sense of holding on to, yeah, but you did this or you hurt me in
Yep.
this way. And this is, so there's a skill in being able to see who a person is in this moment rather than bringing all of the past.
Mm-hmm.
And then to lovingly inquire,
Yes.
okay, can you please show me, or here's what I need to know that this isn't just a one-time thing you're now saying.
Right.
This is who you are becoming.
Yeah.
Right? It can be hard to trust that.
Well, and in that too, know that people will take time to change.
Yeah.
So they may say, I will do better. And they may be honestly trying and they might still slip up. Right. And don't automatically go, see, I knew you were going to do it again.
Right.
And so it's also, we have to give some space for that person. Just like I often say, you're wanting me to give you space to grow and get better. I'm asking for the same thing in return. But if you hold me to a standard that I'm trying to work past, you're also not doing me any service.
Yes.
Right.
Agreed.
So it's how do you have space for both of that? I think another important piece is around forgiveness.
Yeah.
And this one can be tough.
Yeah.
Because until you're truly ready to forgive someone for something, don't say it. Because if you say like, I'm willing to forgive you for it, but you're holding on to it, that's poison.
Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes it's, okay, I'm willing to let this go. It still hurts. And again, I'm not saying you have to let go of how it hurt you or how it bothered you. But if you keep holding those things over someone's head too, you're not giving them an opportunity to grow and develop and atone and move past it. Yes. Right. So it's like, how do you find ways to truly find forgiveness for them? And when they give you forgiveness, accept that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about that there can be an honesty around, I don't know if working toward is the right way to say it, but I'm working on forgiving you.
Yeah.
I'm digesting this. It's taking some time for me to work through and understand why this was painful for me or how I lost trust for you, all of those kinds of things. And if we say, I forgive you too soon, sometimes we don't get to do that work either.
Yeah. Well, there were two awesome things in what you just said there. So there's one, which is kind of that theme we started with of letting the person know where you're at. Uh-huh. I'm not ready to forgive you. It's not to say I never will, but being transparent with the person with where you are. I'm working on it. And it may be, I need time.
Yeah.
As opposed to just saying, I'm not going to forgive you because the person hears it very differently.
Right.
The other thing is saying, I'm working through this and I need time. Mm-hmm. Right. So again, that's that asking for what you need. Yeah. And for the other person, they may be like, but I need you to forgive me so we can move past it. And you have to respect people will move at different paces.
Totally.
And so you can't force it. But again, if they're asking, saying, I need more time, the best thing you can do is give them that space. Yeah. And it will feel uncomfortable because especially if you're the one that's done the wrong.
Yeah.
Again, that's where that shame shows up. We don't want to be sitting in it. And
right. That's where then we go do our work.
Suck it up, Buttercup. You go do your work, right?
And we can also make requests. Okay, would it be okay with you if I check in a week from now to see how you're doing, what you need, just so that we can stay connected about it and we're not doing this in isolation?
Yeah. And that's that person asking back. Okay, I want to stay connected, or I want to make sure we're still communicating. What works for you
Yeah.
as you're working through this, right? So it's not a just, okay, I'll go off and sit in the corner. Again, it's that we're pointing to, it's a constant dialogue, it's constant
Right.
communication. Because so often, what I've seen in some of my past relationships, but with friends, is one person is holding on to something, but they don't tell the other person.
Right.
And then they get upset because the person's not changing. If I don't know, I can't fix it. Like if I go to a restaurant and I have bad service,
Yeah.
if I just leave and go, that was terrible
That was
service,
terrible and it's never going to be better.
it's never going to be better, right? But if I say, hey, can I speak to the manager?
Mhm.
And here's what I didn't appreciate in it,
Mhm.
that gives them a chance to work on it, right? And I'll also tell the server that's serving us too. But if I don't let them know, how can I expect them to do better? Kind of like
Yeah.
that with relationships too.
And yeah, and I'm appreciating that you said it's a constant conversation,
Mhm.
it's a constant dialogue. And not that people have to be, this is the only thing you do. We all have jobs and lives and kids
Yeah.
and everything else going on. But I will say that in my relationships these days, or in my current relationship, there is an ongoing dialogue and we actually make time for check-ins and okay, is there anything that you're holding on to or anything that you felt disappointed by or anything,
Yeah.
and to be totally transparent, that can get put off for a little bit. And then a
Yeah.
month later, we'll
Life
be like,
happens.
oh,
Right.
we haven't done that in a little while.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, something I love in that too is it creates a cadence for you where
mhm,
like, I know we're going to have a conversation and talk about it. So
exactly.
it helps people let go of, I got to hold on to this forever.
Yes.
One thing that I've done in past relationship too is like, if you don't bring it up when we have that conversation, we are agreeing you can't bring it up later
Oh,
because that's not fair to the
really?
other person. Like it maybe not quite that clear, but like part of what it is if you don't bring it up
Mhm.
3 months down the road, you can't throw that back because that's not fair to the person.
You
So
can't
it's
throw back
like
the
if there's, let's
blame
say,
or the
right, like let's say
resentment.
there's something that happened where there was a hurt that was caused.
Okay.
And I get that maybe in that next conversation, you're not ready to.
Yeah.
But if you go for an extended period of time without bringing it up,
Mhm.
you're doing a disservice to the relationship. Right?
100%.
So it's also taking ownership for it. Now, it doesn't mean that bringing it up means it has to be resolved in that moment either, but it's also letting the person know, like, here's something that I'm sitting with still.
Would
And
you say though that then later you can't bring it up or you can't talk about it or you have a way to talk about
no,
it?
not that you can't talk about it. Let me make a distinction. What I
Okay.
mean by it is you can't weaponize it, maybe is another way to do
Very,
it.
there you go.
Right.
Yeah,
Like
thank you.
don't use it to hit me over the head with it.
Yes.
I am open to talking about it, but I'm also going to get curious. If you waited 4 months to tell me this,
Right.
and it's been pissing you off when I've done maybe that thing, maybe a word I use, well, you're also not being fair to me
Yeah.
because you're getting upset at something I'm doing, but haven't let me know. So there's
There you
no way
go.
I can correct it.
And in
So it's
there
an
I
ongoing
hear,
thing.
yeah, I
Yeah.
hear that sovereignty and that integrity of, hey, you are
Mm-hmm.
prioritizing yourself. You're not
Right.
letting yourself be walked on or blamed, shamed, attacked for something.
Right. Right.
And you're also saying, I'm curious and I'm open and I want to understand you and what's
Yeah.
happening.
And the other thing I was appreciating about your check-ins is that requires a lot of trust to say to
Mhm.
the person, like, where did I miss the mark this week? How can I
Right.
love you better? Right. Because sometimes
I love the
it
question,
can,
how can I love you better?
right. Yeah. Well, and
So
I'll tell you,
beautiful.
the 5 love languages, like that book transformed my life
Yeah.
because one, I realized I have my primary language and I just default to that. But if I don't know what my partner's love language is,
Yeah.
I may think I'm demonstrating that love and filling their love tank for those that have read the book and
Right.
know it.
And they're not
And
feeling
I'm
it.
missing the mark. They're going like, I'm starving over here.
Mhm.
And so it's like one of the biggest things that hit me in that book is it's a constant act. And you want to fill somebody else's love tank, not with the intent that they will return the favor, because
Yeah.
that is manipulating,
Yeah.
but doing it from a place of, here's how I want to show you that you are loved in the way that you want to be shown.
Yeah. And
And by
all
the
of
same
this,
token, I had to learn to ask for what I needed in my language too.
yeah, all of this is so mature.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
think,
it's a work in progress.
yeah.
And part of what I have to remind myself too is I am worth it and I deserve it.
Mm,
Right.
yes.
Because if I want my partner to show up
Mhm.
and be real and be themselves, I have to do the same. Otherwise, I am lying to them. And
Yeah.
that's just not fair. And that's not the relationship I want to be in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, one last question.
Okay.
What do you think that all of this makes possible? The kinds of conversations, the sharing your intention, prioritizing yourself, asking for what you need and want, having this consistent dialogue.
Yeah.
How has it changed your love
It's
life?
it's the gateway to real human connection.
Yeah.
That's it. On a way that is intimate beyond what we often collapse with intimacy, but it's a way of creating intimacy on such a level that like I can't even put words to it.
I know this is where it's always hard for me to put words to that.
Right.
So, do you have anything you can say about what's changed in your relationships?
I will. So yeah, absolutely. I will now ask for what I want and need. And
Mhm.
I do it without attachment.
Mhm.
I ask my partner to do the same, even if they're not quite sure how to do that.
Yep.
And I listen differently. And I think I also say I give myself and them a little more grace
Mhm.
and remind myself we're both human. And so we're not going to get it perfect.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what's important, if it's that connection, then I'm going to come back to that 10 times out of 10. And even when it's hard, that's what's going to help me stay.
Yeah. Would you say you feel more supported? Would you say you feel more um love? Would you say like anything specific as, you said that's the true intimate connection.
Yeah. I think what I'd say is so, yes, it's like I feel more loved when I'm met in that way.
Mhm.
I feel more loved. I feel more seen. I feel more appreciated.
Mhm.
I feel more like I can be myself too.
Yes.
And I
That's
don't have
huge.
to show up a certain way,
Yeah.
And so I just get to be myself
Ah,
authentically, like raw.
yes.
And that's all that other person needs to bring too. Right.
That's
And
priceless.
yeah. And in that, we still got all our baggage.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's not like it magically disappears, but how do we want to partner together and build the future we want as
Yes.
opposed to getting dragged back by all that stuff in our past?
Well, right. And the baggage is there. You tell me if this feels true for you, because for me, it's the baggage is there, but we're not making a bonfire
No, no, no.
with the
Yeah.
baggage. We're not burning our house
Right.
down. We're
Right.
sitting in front of a smaller fire, looking at it, being like, "Ooh, okay, that burned or that singed," or how do we want to,
Yeah.
hone this fire such that it actually still gives us warmth and we're not burning ourselves down.
The way I think of it, there's a song by Erica Badu called Bag Lady, and she talks about like carrying all this stuff, all this baggage from the past. And part of what I envision is all of those experiences help me become the person I am.
Yeah.
So I am not saying I want to get rid of any of them. Some of them were painful and I don't want to repeat them, but it also helped me become the person I am today.
Yeah.
So there's almost a recognition and appreciation for it. But I also say we get to have a choice in this moment how we want to be going forward.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be dictated by all that.
Yes.
That can inform us, but it doesn't have to direct where we go in the future. And so that's a distinction I remind myself. We'll give yourself like a virtual high five there.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And that takes practice too. Because sitting here having this conversation with you, it's easy for me to remember that. In the middle of an intense conversation with a loved one, it might not come to mind so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But when I do remember it, again, it has me almost literally sit back and go, hold on, what is it I want?
Right. I mean, and that is my goal with this too, is that we get to hear your story, other people's stories to the point where, and again, we have to do our own work and our own practice and our own capacity to witness ourselves and to tolerate discomfort and all of this, but that we get to the point where we can be in that moment where the rubber meets the road and we can pause and say, okay, this is not how I want this to go.
Well, and here's one thing that just hit me as you said that too. I kind of don't like a lot of like romantic movies. And here's why. It idolizes love in a way that's just not realistic.
It does.
Like here's been my experience.
I say fuck the Disney fairy tale.
Oh, yeah. But it's hard. Like anybody that tells you a great relationship, like it's perfect, there's never any, like they're selling you something.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be worth the money. Some of the hard speed bumps and trials that you go through is what makes that relationship richer, right? I don't wish any harm on anybody or any difficulty. And you know what? It's going to test you. And if you get through it, you're going to be stronger for it. But you've got to be willing to do that too. And so let go of like I said, that look at that amazing romance they have on Instagram. It's like, you don't see the other 23 hours and 57 minutes of the day when that's not what's happening.
Yeah.
So don't compare yourself to the Joneses. Like live your life in your relationship. Don't worry about what's on TV and the movies and social media. Like, fuck that noise, because that ain't real.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sells
Listen to
tickets.
people who are
That
willing
that
to
makes people
actually
money,
tell
right?
you
Yeah.
this can be hard.
You talk to any couple that's been together for years, like decades, they're going to say there was hard times, and
Yeah.
that's part of what helped them stay together,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah.
Thank you.
There we go. We're solving all
Thank
the
you
world's problems
so
here. Like, this
much.
is awesome. We did it.
I feel deeply moved and inspired and grateful for you and really see how whoever gets to be in relationship with you is extremely fortunate because there's love, that feeling of love and the bliss of love, but it doesn't get to live on if we can't communicate like this. It gets snuffed out over and over. So,
Yeah. I
so
say that love is a verb.
yes,
And
it's an action. It's a
yeah.
continual
Yeah.
doing, practicing.
Well, and I want to say thank you, not just for letting me be in this conversation with me, um, or with you, whatever that was supposed to be. Like, thanks for letting me be here. And I love, no pun intended, that you are starting these conversations
Mm,
because I think people getting to hear the real, the raw,
yeah.
where it isn't always pretty,
Yep.
the Disney story, that's what has people go, oh, okay, I thought it was just me.
Yeah.
And I
I'm not
realize other
alone.
people.
I'm not bad. I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
It's hard for all of us.
And there's no one way to do it. Like if that was the case, there'd be that book written and
Yeah.
we'd have all be living our lives in that relationship. And that's not reality. So thank you for creating these spaces. And I'm excited for all the people to get to be in conversation with you and, just benefit from these things that you're bringing them to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And where do you want people to go to find more of you?
Sure. So if they want to learn more about me, a couple places. If you want to learn about the book, it's wholemanjourney.com. The podcast is vulnerable-man.com, and you can find it on all your normal platforms. And if you find me on LinkedIn, you'll know it's the right Christopher Veal because I have Vulnerability Vanguard after my name. And so those are probably the best place to find me. I don't do a lot of social media, so I don't do the Insta or all that other stuff. So that's the best places.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for being here today. And thank you for the depth of the work that you've done on yourself and in relationships.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Practicing Love. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and gained insight into yourself and your current and past relationships and inspiration for what's possible. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review to help people find us. If you'd like more support in your love life, be sure to get your free copy of my best-selling book, Honest Sex, at shanajamescoaching.com/free. That's shanajamescoaching.com/free. And we'll see you next time.